Hi, Assalamualaikum. I am Nurziehan Baharuddin. Today I will be presenting a research titled Animating Cultural Identity, Multicultural Storytelling and Narrative Agency in Malaysian Animation. Animation has increasingly been recognized as a cultural medium that communicates social values, identity, and ideology beyond its function as entertainment. In Malaysia, animated productions are frequently praised for visually representing multicultural diversity and promoting ideals of harmony and national unity. The objective of this study is to examine how multicultural visual elements function within the narrative structure of Malaysian animation, to examine how storytelling practice contribute to either balance or hierarchical representation of cultural diversity. Recent scholarship suggests that such representation may remain uneven when examined beyond surface level imagery, as narrative authority and agency are often structured around dominant cultural framework. This paper addressed this gap by examining multicultural representation at the level of narrative structure and agency rather than visual presence alone. It argues that narrative organization determine whose values define normality, whose action drive the story, and whose perspective shape resolution. Media and visual culture play a key role in reinforcing this model by promoting harmonious imagery while avoiding deeper question of cultural power. Research indicates that Malay cultural norm often function as the narrative baseline, while with other cultures occupy secondary roles. Visual semiotic reveals how culture is encoded through visual sign, but narrative theories demonstrate that true representational equity is determined by how storytelling structures distribute agency, power, and resolution within the narratives. This study integrates three complementary frameworks. Hall's theory allowed us to identify how culture is visually encoded through signs such as attire, language, and setting. Todorov narrative structure explained how stories progress from equilibrium to resolution, revealing whose values define normality and closure. Grema's attentional model enables analysis of narrative agency by mapping who initiates action, who benefits, and whose values are validated. Together, this framework shift the analysis from surface level multicultural visibility to deeper narrative power relation. This research employ qualitative interpretivist research design grounded in a case study approach to examine multicultural representation within Malaysian animated narrative. Data analysis is conducted in three interconnected stages: the identification of multicultural visual element, the examination of how these elements are positioned within narrative structure, and the analysis of narrative roles and cultural agency, enabling a comprehensive understanding of how cultural diversity is visually represented and narratively organized within Malaysian animation. Preliminary analysis suggests that Malaysian animation consistently incorporates multicultural visual markers such as ethnic attire, language variation, and festive practice. These elements effectively communicate ideals of coexistence and harmony. However, narrative analysis reveals recurring pattern in which dominant cultural values define narrative equilibrium and resolution, while minority cultures are positioned as helpers or symbolic participants. This pattern reflects broader national narrative that prioritize stability and harmony over cultural plurality. The finding indicates that multicultural representation in Malaysian animation operates more strongly at the level of visual inclusion than narrative empowerment, highlighting narrative agency as a critical dimension of cultural representation. This study demonstrates that meaning full multicultural representation in animation cannot be assessed through visual diversity alone. Narrative structure and agency play a decisive role in shaping cultural power and inclusion. By applying a triangulated narrative analysis, the research revealed how Malaysian animation simultaneously promotes harmony while reproducing hierarchical cultural framework. The study contributes to animation studies and cultural representation scholarship by emphasizing the need for inclusive narrative design in animated storytelling. Thank you for the attention.